So welcome, Aaron Korsh. Thank you for your gracious hospitality and being here and, you know, doing the thing.
All right. Thank you for
Yeah,
having me.
yeah. Okay, I want to jump into, so when did you start? And I think people who are familiar with the story know that originally Suits was conceived in the the world of finance, right? So tell everybody, like, so when did you first start conceiving and start like kind of ruminating with this idea and then putting it to paper, and then talk about that process of how it morphed and changed, your reaction to it initially, and then how decisions from the studio, like, or the network, like, help to create Suits, I guess, if that makes sense. It's a big thing to undertake, I know.
No,
So
no, I get it. It's
yeah.
not. Um, uh, well, it was the writer's strike, so I struggled, like I said, to get staffed. It was like 8 years, and again, if people are on this thing are struggling to make it in this field or in any field, like I always want to stress, like, I almost gave up 100 times, right? Like, there is no guarantee you're going to make it. And a lot of times when you see someone that's been successful, you just assume they skated on in and always knew they were going to make it. And like, that is not the case, right? I was very unsure of myself. I did not know I was ever even going to get a job. The idea of creating my own show was never in my mind, right? But I finally got staffed on a comedy, this show, Notes from the Underbelly, that was on for two seasons. And it got canceled during the writer's strike in 2008. So as soon as the strike was over, my agent at the time, who is now my manager, he was like, look, you used to work on Wall Street. You always tell me these stories about this guy, Harvey, and all these crazy stories. You should write about that. Aaron, you know that world, write about it. My goal was to write a half an hour, like, entourage type thing. And it just came out as an hour long kind of, it was a little bit of it was like a page turner, right? It was a little bit of you wanted to find out what was going to happen next. And when I wrote it at the time, writers write scripts to try to get work, right? At the time, low level writers never rarely sold pilots. So I was just writing it to get a job, to show to other showrunners. And so, hold on, my computer's messing up here. So anyway, I finished writing the script. I showed it to my manager, and my manager was like, I think we can sell this. And I was like, what are you, nuts? We're going to sell this? Like, just get me a job, Dennis. But he ended up selling it. And the network said, we like it, but we don't do, like, they needed to do what was called a procedural, right? Like they needed something that had a case of the week, like a law show or a doctor show or something like that. So I thought, all right, if it's going to be a case of the week, the only way to make, they have to be lawyers. I can make them kind of half investment bankers and half lawyers. So I was like, I can do that. And obviously it was not my preference to do it, but once we did that, I actually thought it made it ultimately much better, because the consequences of being a fake lawyer versus just pretending you went to Harvard undergrad, it's much different. It's a bigger deal. His jeopardy was much higher. Also, the law has a lot of ethical implications. Whatever. I think it, in the end, made it much better. I was very glad it did it. But the first version of the script I wrote, they were like, you lost the magic of the Wall Street version in writing this first script. And they basically made me start from scratch. And no joke, I had like a 3-month nervous breakdown. I couldn't write a thing because they gave me like all these different notes. And I thought, like, if I listen to this note, it violates this note. And if I want to do this, it's going to violate that. And I couldn't do anything for like months. And then finally I was like, I gotta finish this thing or I'm going to go crazy. So I just wrote it. And I was like, I said, forget these notes. I'm just writing another version. Fuck them. And I basically handed the script in. I was like, here's your script. Fuck you. And I thought it sucked. I mean, I didn't know. I was so in my head. And the woman that gave me my first writing job. I showed it to her and she was like, they're going to make this show before I handed it in. And I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. You're an idiot. And anyway, I handed it in and then they said they were going to make it. And I was like, oh shit. And then it was great. But then I had to figure out, like, I was a low level writer. I'd never worked on show that much. I had to figure out how to run my own show, what I wanted to do. And it was a huge learning curve. You know, usually
Did they bring anybody alongside you who had like kind of
they
showrunner experience to kind of like walk alongside you on that?
they did for the first year, although USA at the time was like, back then it was very rare that an inexperienced writer would sell a pilot in the first place. But if you ever did, usually they would put somebody above you, an experienced showrunner, and that person would run the show. You'd just be a writer on staff of the show that you created, and they would have all the, you know, say in it. But USA was not like that. USA was very supportive of their creators. They wanted the person with the original voice to have the say. So they did pair me with someone that first season, and it was, you know, it was a mixed relationship. But I guess what I'll say is this: first of all, on a personal level, I love the guy and I trusted him. He wasn't going to try to take over the show behind my back. So, you know, we had a lot of issues, a lot of creative differences, a lot of creative issues. But as he always said, they were on the table. They weren't like, nobody was going behind each other's backs.
Yes.
But we saw the show differently in almost every way. And I think it was mainly a blessing, a little bit of a blessing and a curse, but mainly a blessing because it forced me to fight for my way, which forced me to kind of sort of clarify what I wanted it to be. And in some ways, he had an influence on the show that lasted for the whole run of the show. You know, I think Louis Litt being the character that he became was largely influenced by him, and I am forever grateful. But the base, his idea to my, I think he would not disagree with this, was he wanted each week to explore the world of the client, right? If your client owned a baseball team, 90% of the show would be in the world of baseball, right? Almost like, I would say, like Bones in a law firm, right?
And
Bones,
kind of like what House of Lies did with like the consulting thing. Every episode was that client
yes,
for that episode, right?
Yes. And this, I wanted the world that we were going to explore to be the internal lives of the people within this law firm, right? Those are sort of diametrically opposed visions.
For sure.
But we figured it out. We made it work. But once I sort of got my feet under me, then, from then on, I was just running the show. But it was a struggle. It was a struggle. Also, look, I'd never been in an edit bay before. I never scored, put music in a show before. I'd had a little bit of experience on set and giving notes, but not a lot. But the thing that I will say is, when you're a writer's assistant for all those years, you get to watch. Writers' assistants usually have a pretty close relationship with the showrunner, especially in comedies. So you get to watch all these different showrunners and their approaches and their styles and how they give notes and what they do. And it's like you're picking and choosing the way you want to be when you get to be a showrunner. Like I started to resent it at the end. I didn't want to be a writer's assistant for 8 years. But like, once I became a showrunner, I was like, oh shit, what would so-and-so do in this situation? What would this person do? What would that person do? Phil Rosenthal's, he did 2 things. This is the first guy I ever learned from, was like an Emmy-winning showrunner, right?
Right.
And 2 things he did. One, he read every script out loud, all the parts. I thought everybody did that, right? Turns out he was the only person I ever saw that did that. No other showrunner did that. And it's like, how can you know if your words work if you don't speak them, right? Like, it's a lot different to read something on the page than say it out loud. So I always did that. And another thing he did was, if something didn't work, but it was a performance issue, not a writing issue, he wouldn't rewrite it. He would just work with the actors to get the performance right. Other places, it's like, if it didn't work the first time the actor said it, they'd rewrite it. Yeah. I was like, look, they're trying one way. Give them a chance to get it. And I mean, I would guess as an actor, I wouldn't want to have things rewritten constantly. Like in a sitcom, they rewrite every day of the week till they perform it. The closer you can get to having it set, the more time they can have to explore all the ways to make it great. So he didn't over rewrite, is I guess what I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the two things I learned. But the other thing I was going to say was that I forgot. The one other thing that, and because this is actors mainly, I think listening, like when I was a writer's assistant on every show that I worked on, in particular because I was working in comedies, the actors at the end of every scene would improvise, 2 or 3 lines, right? Just 2 or 3, 4 lines. And I always thought they were the funniest lines. And the reason I thought they were the funniest lines was because there's something about when you make something up you're literally making it up, right? They would be riffing off each other. You can't create that. If you'd have written those same 4 lines and they were performing them, it wouldn't have been as good. But they're coming up with it on the fly. So I always loved them, and no showrunner I ever worked with put those things in an episode, and I never knew why. And so when we did Suits, if the actors ad-libbed something funny, I did everything I could to put it in. Now, sometimes they ad-lib things that I didn't think were funny or good or whatever, and they would be like, "Why didn't you put that in?" And I was like, "Because I didn't think it was right." But that's what made it magic. There's a lot of magic that you have to allow for actors to bring to your show. Like you can't casting a show, getting lucky with the cast, right? Is it's priceless. It's magic in a bottle. It's chemistry. We didn't know we had it, but we ended up having it, in my opinion. And it's, I am so grateful for them for their talent in both performing what we wrote and also sometimes ad-libbing great.
Yes. There are few showrunners who have had to deal with the challenge of a person dating a royal and then marrying a royal. Like,
there's not few, there's one.
One, right. Talk about, like, what was that like? We don't need, I don't want to beat this. I'm sure you had all kinds of interviews where, it's gotten beaten. But there's a practical challenge of like navigating that world while you're trying to get this show done in a timely fashion under budget. You know what I mean? Like, what was that challenge like of navigating all of that?
When you're a showrunner, there's 50 things that you're like, why is this pain in the ass in my way, right? Like, that's why you're mad half the time, right? Because you're just busy and you're trying to get this thing done on time and under budget, like you say, and there's always something, right? There's just always something. But it was, in the big picture, it was just one more thing. It wasn't like, she had some scheduling conflicts, but they all do.
Right.
And there were some things like we were not able to do because, the royal family didn't want us to say something or do something, but they were not, like, at the time on the day that I got it. It's like this, any day that you find out some actor wants a day off for whatever reason, the moment that you find it out, you're just like, shit. And then you're like, all right, now we got to deal with this. So it was not a huge pain in the ass. It was just one more added complication. On the other hand, it probably got us some extra notoriety, whatever.
It was awesome. All right, let's go to the chat area. Katie asked, in today's market, can an aspiring writer manage to sell a project and gain creative control / input? Or is the path to showrunner still dependent on climbing the ladder of the writer's room? Actually, that was Andrew, but Katie's got the name on the Zoom there.
All right. I have to say, I'm not a complete expert on that, but I do think much more so than when I got lucky. Like I said, it was like, there were just not a lot of places that were taking chances on relatively inexperienced writers and letting them sort of have creative control over the show. I do think it is possible. Whenever, I'll also say this: no one ever is granted, right, full creative control of anything. Like, no matter what you are or who you are, if you see a movie that's about like someone's needing to take the leadership role, right? I always used to think they were kind of cliche, like the coach says, I can't give you this team, you have to take the team. And it's always the same story, right? And I'm like, this is a little cliche. And then when you actually are in it, you realize why. Like, I wrote Suits, I had a vision in my head of how it should be, how it should sound, how it should look. And every single person, the director, the producers, the studio, the network, they all want to tell you how it should be, right? And in your mind, you're like, what the fuck? How can you know how it should be better than I know how it should be? But they still do. They want to tell you. Every writer on your staff is trying to tell you, this is what the show should be. I know better than you. And you have to learn how to navigate the ship without, you can't just stamp your feet and say, you have to learn how to sometimes listen to them. Like, let's say you want to do an idea. And this I sometimes say is what defines a showrunner. There are moments when you want to do something, and every writer on your staff, whether they tell you or not, but usually they're going to tell you, I think, they don't want to do it. They disagree. They think it's a bad idea. It's stupid. And sometimes when they all think that, you have to listen to them. You have to be like, look, if every one of them thinks that, maybe they're right, and you have to listen to them. And sometimes you have to say, I don't care that you all think it's wrong. We're doing it because I know in my gut this is the right thing. And when you choose to listen to them and when you choose not to, it's, that's what defines your show sometimes. And so anyway, it is possible to have creative control, but creative control is not really, you either have it or you don't have it. It's a spectrum. And it has to do, because you also want to keep people that are working underneath you engaged and invested. And if you never do what they want, you're not going to get the best out of them. So there's a bunch of levels to that answer.
And of course, I mean, like there were certain hoops that you had to jump through with network and studio. I mean, and I'm sure you didn't get your way 100% of the time with those folks, with those executives, right?
Absolutely. And look, you have to pick and choose your battles, right? If they want to, if there's something that like violates your core tenet of things, you don't want to do that, right? And you have to, I would always think to myself, if this thing that this person is trying to, in the early years, right? In the later years, they kind of let me do whatever I wanted. We were a hit show. They would give me notes, but I listened to their notes plenty. They were smart people. But you pick your battles, right? If the network or studio wants you to do something that you think is like a little bit worse, but like they really feel strongly about it, you do it, right? That's how you gain their respect. You gain their trust. But sometimes, here, I'll give you an example. Amanda Schull, who played Katrina on the show, right? I don't know if I've ever told this story publicly, but like in the first season, she auditioned for a role that I wanted to cast her in. I thought she was great. And the studio, I think it was the studio, might have been the network, they just didn't like her. They didn't want her for the role. So at the time I was like, there's so many roles, there's so many battles. It was just a guest star. I said, okay, fine, we'll cast the other person. And I just so happened to run into her in between seasons 1 and 2. We were shut down, but I was still going into the office, and there was we let a casting for some other show be in the office. And I see her going into audition, and I was like, look, I just want to let you know, I remembered your audition. I thought you were great. Keep at it. Like, maybe we'll find a role for you one day. I didn't know if we would, but I just wanted to give her some positive acknowledgement. So season 2 comes, she auditions for Katrina, and I wanted to give her the part. I loved her audition. Studio says again, we don't think she's good. And at that point, I'm like, this is bullshit. Like, they wanted this other actress who was very good actress. She just had a different take on the character. And I said to them, I'm like, look, guys, this is my character. I have a take on this character. And if you make me hire this other actress, I'm going to make her play it the way Amanda is interpreting it, because that's who the character is to me. That's who we're writing for. And that's what we're doing. So they ended up capitulating and let me hire Amanda Schull. Now it's 2 years later, and they're like, you can't have Amanda anymore because we're hiring her as the #1 on the call sheet for 12 Monkeys.
Yeah.
Right? This is a person they fought me tooth and nail to have a guest spot, right? And then 2 years later, they're stealing her from me to make her #1 on a different show of theirs. So, which I was very happy for her.
Right.
But anytime they disagreed with me after that, I'd be like, Amanda Schull, you're welcome, right? Like you fought tooth and nail and now you love her. So maybe next time, give me the benefit of the doubt. So that gets back to the first question. It got me riled up. Like that's how you control, right? You got to fight for control like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to be a dick, right? Like Harvey Specter would be, I'm going to put it in their face, right? I was like, I just got you the lead of your show. You're welcome. Leave me alone about some other guest cast. So anyway.
That's hilarious. From Zoe, hey, Aaron, ! I'm currently in my first writer's room as a staff writer. Any words of advice, ? What do you value most in your writers in the room?
Oh, shit. Now I got to know. I really want to know what show it is, Zoe. But if you're on your first show, I think, look, when I was a writer's assistant for 8 years, I learned this as a writer's assistant, and then I really learned it as a showrunner. Like you want to pick your spots, right? You want the showrunner to get used to every time you say something, it's worth listening to, right? So that doesn't mean you have to say things very often, right? You're not as experienced as people above you. But as long as your batting average is really high, every time you say something, it's smart, they're going to over time be like, oh shit, every time Zoe talks, I might not even always agree with it, whatever, but she always brings up a great point. She's not trying to fight me and tell me that I'm wrong about things. You know, you want to solve problems rather than point out problems, and you want to pick your spots, and you want to help the showrunner make the show that they want to make. Right, that to me is the best advice I can give to a new runner.
That's great advice. Let me ask you this: do you think that if your original concept of the series, like set in the finance world, do you think that it would be a go now? Kind of in the, like we've got the world of Billions, we've got the world of Succession.
Given Billions, yes, I do think the original Wall Street version of the show might be made now. But as I say, I am glad that we made them lawyers. I think it is a better show for having them be lawyers. And I think that's another thing about writing or acting. Like you have to be willing to embrace something that isn't the way, like once someone says to you, look, we're not making the show if you want to be Wall Street. So I was like, I'm going to embrace making them lawyers. And it turns out, be open to the fact that it could make the show better. It did make the show better,
Yeah.
Look, again, I don't know how many people are actors, but in the writer's world, and Kevin Bray, the director of the Suits pilot and a longtime friend of mine, one of my closest friends now, he told me like there's a progression of notes of processing notes that actors have, and it's probably true of writers too. And the first, you give an actor a note, and their first thought that goes through their head is, "Fuck you." And, right? And then the second note is, and then the second thought is, I suck. And then the third note is, wait, what was the note? So like, that's true. And writers are the same, right? You write a script and somebody tells you there's something wrong with it. And you're like, fuck you. And then you're like, I suck. And then you're like, wait, what? How can we make it better? So I don't know what made me do that. But.
What is the one scene in Suits that went on the screen exactly as you saw without having to deal with any navigation troubles with the studios?
Oh, shit. I mean, there were definitely more than one.
Yeah.
I wish I could remember.
Was there ever a scene, well, I'm going to piggyback on what you're saying. Was there ever a scene that when you saw it either on set or the finished product, like you had an emotional reaction to, like tears or just.
Oh, yeah.
Something that was like, that caught you off guard, that caught you by surprise?
There were many, many, many scenes like that. Look, when I would watch the director's cut, right? I'm watching, I haven't seen it before. And in the later years, I got smart and I would have one of the writers do producing duties and take a pass at a cut before I watched it, right? Because the more there was Genevieve Sparling, the more she got to know, it was just better for everybody if I watched a more polished episode, right?
Right.
But when I watched a given scene or a given episode, I would have one of three reactions, right? It was either sort of like I wanted it to be, happy with it, but what I expected, which was great. I was always very happy with that. Or it was radically different than I wanted, and I would be fucking furious. But then you'd watch it again, you'd be like, maybe it's not that bad. Then you'd watch it again and be like, it's pretty good. And then you'd look for different performances and you'd change the scene, you'd try to make it something you liked. And then there were scenes, this is my favorite, is you watch a scene and it was like way better than I could have ever imagined. And it's hard for me to think of one in particular because it happened a lot, right?
Yeah.
But I'll say, I'm just trying to think. I mean, I remember 510 Faith was a pretty impactful episode. And when Mike turns and says, because I'm afraid, right? He's in it, he's afraid, right? Like, what's he going to do? And he screams it out to his priest. And it was, I remember that giving me chills. I got tears at the finale of Suits when I watched it for the first time, in particular the end montage, right, to that song.
Yeah.
And I knew we were going to put that song in. 6 months earlier, I told
You guys use soundtrack like so great. Y'all really did.
Yeah. Well, that one just brought tears to my eye. I mean, I started crying when I told the editor what song I wanted. Just envisioning the clips and that song, I was like, I'm going to cry when you do it, and I did.
All right. Actually, I got the final question. This is it. I can't believe I didn't ask you when we had lunch. Okay, so why did you cave on Harvey and Donna getting together? Because I remember having conversations with Chelsea and Bonnie, like in the office, going like, why is Aaron like, he's like digging his, like he's not going to give the fans the fact, like Harvey, that was a whole thing, like always on Twitter, the fans like getting in arguments with you about like those two getting together. So why did you, were you always thinking that they were going to get together and you were just teasing the fan base? What was going on with that?
Yeah, I don't view it as caving.
Okay.
It's the same thing. Like when the fans push you to want to do something, right? It's like, I don't care. I'm not making this show. The fans are no different than the network, right?
Right.
And I would say this on Twitter. If I give you exactly what you want, you're going to want something different. Like, I don't care what you are screaming for. First of all, it's like a tiny, very vocal percentage of fans. So they do not speak for everyone. But once you realize as a showrunner, every decision that you make, anywhere from 10 to 90% of the fans are going to hate it, right? There's no decision you're going to make where 100% of the fans love it. There is none, right? So I know there's a huge chunk of fans that think the first season of Suits was the best season, and I ruined it after that by making it serialized and less case of the weeky, right? And I don't care. If I make the show that I'm guessing what they want, I'm done, because I can't guess. I don't know what they're going to want, right? I have to make the show that I love, and fuck them, right? And I don't mean that like fuck them, like I don't care. I want them to love it, but once I'm guessing what they want, I have no. Where's my guiding?
You're chasing an audience.
Yes. So I have to. So when I cut a scene that I think is funny, it's because it made me laugh, right? If it makes you laugh, I'm very happy. I want it to make you laugh. But if it doesn't make me laugh, why am I making a TV show, right? Sometimes in the network would give me a note. And this editor, one of our editors, it was a scene, whatever. It was a scene where Lewis doesn't understand that he's like hitting on Harvey, but he's hitting on Harvey by bareback, whatever. And at the end of the scene, he ad-libs this line and he goes, "Hiya!" Right? Really big over the top. And I left it in there, right? It was so funny to me. And the network was like, can you take that out? Because they thought it was, I don't know why. So we get in the edit bay and I'm going to try to take it out. And the editor just says to me, Sandra, she said, Aaron, we've watched this scene 10 times. You've laughed out loud every single time. So I was like, I'm leaving it in. Like, why am I taking this out? Right.
Right.
So to get back to the question of why did I cave? So you are influenced by, it's not that the fans don't influence you, it's just one thing that's coming in. So you have a totality of things. And I would say once the fans started really wanting Harvey and Donna to get together, it gave me delight to not put them together.
Right.
I felt like what they really wanted was to want them to be together more
Right.
than, like a dog chasing a car. You don't
Yeah.
catch car. So, but then I was neutral on whether they were really going to be together. I can't remember when I knew, look, they're probably going to end up together. It was probably around season, I think 6 or 7. It could have been 5. I can't remember. But I definitely didn't think they were going to get together in season 8. I did not think that. And we were in the middle of rewriting or writing 8/16, the finale. And Ethan Drogan and Ethan would argue with me over every single thing in the world. And oftentimes they led to, good things. And we were up there in Canada, and it was like me and Ethan and Genevieve were all up there. Ethan was arguing over something having nothing to do with that. And somehow it popped in my head. I'm like, holy shit, what if Harvey and Donna get, it just popped into my head. So to me, it was the natural progression of what we were doing, but I was very satisfied with it. I loved it, right? I loved it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I will say this, and I've said this to some of the fans, like, we gave them a scene, they were in bed in 901, right? And they were like, why didn't you give us more scenes of them in bed? I'm like, if I'd have given you 50 scenes of them in bed, you'd say, why didn't you give me 55 scenes of them? It's my feeling. They're like my kids are never going to ask me, why did you give me too many French fries, right? They're always going to want more French fries. So you have to make something that, my goal was to make something I loved and I was proud of. And I loved, like, if I wasn't happy with them being together, I wouldn't have done it. I definitely would not have done it. But yeah, it's not that you are not influenced by them. And I think when they first started rooting for Harvey and Donna to get together, I really enjoyed not getting Harvey and Donna together.
It was very clear.
But making it seem like they were good. And again, I'll say this, like, also fans are strange. Like, I never watch TV and get angry when I was 7 years old, I wasn't like, how dare they not give me something on Happy Days? It was like, whatever was on, I loved it. I don't really get that, but it's a different age, Twitter.
Yeah, no, I'm outraged every day about something. So
very good.
All right. We're done. Everybody look for next month. Thank you for stopping in and letting us talk. And I hope you got some value out of it. We'll talk soon. All right. Bye, y'all. Thanks, everybody. See you, Aaron.